record, yeah.
All right, welcome everybody. Here we are, Dave and Jerry's Real Estate Cafe. First show after summer. We've had a good summer. We used to start off, we would take like just August off. And then before you know, we take July off. Then we take June, July.
The weather was too nice.
The weather was too nice. But you know, we work hard, right? You say work hard, play hard, right? So when the season comes, and you know, we were doing shows like weekly shows and building it up. So
we were doing a lot. So it was good to take a break and you know, fire up the jets again. So
exactly.
It's good to be back.
So we're back rolling. Now we got hybrid stuff going on because we still have some of our summer events that are running. So for example, we have Aaron Lutz here from Builders Club,
nice.
who we will chat with soon. And that was a music event because the summertime is a time for me when I'm out and, you know, wanting to play music. And that's when I start having illusions and maybe I could become a full-time musician.
Well, when you elevate yourself into rock star status like you, then the demand gets increased, right? So we've been busy on a little tour of Southern Ontario.
You know, we're just trying to have a good time, enjoy life, because life is short.
Yes, it sure is.
So you have to make the most of every day. So that's what we do.
Good mindset.
So it's been fun, and we've been doing some musical fundraisers. So that's what we have coming up this coming Sunday, which we'll talk to Aaron about shortly. We'll talk about Gilda's Club, because Gilda's Club is the charity. So for those, so we'll get into that. We'll get into that soon. So first, Jerry, we promised people that we were going to talk about some year-end tax strategies. The other thing that's, you know, hanging over our head obviously now is, hanging over our head, maybe a good way of putting it. Justin Trudeau back in for another 4 years, I guess, unless he calls an election every 6 months.
I think he said he's there for 18 months or something, but
that's it.
Yeah, who knows? But
all right. Well, I thought maybe you start again. No, you don't start again the term again.
I think you do, but when you're in a minority government, the lifespan is usually 18 to 24 months, and by then everybody wants you to do another election. I don't know if anybody wants to see another election for a while. I don't.
Probably not. But I feel like the Conservatives maybe didn't run I kept seeing these commercials that said, you know, why is he spending $600 million now? You know, just focusing on the negative.
It's attack
but just focus on who you are. What are you bringing to the table? I don't even know who to vote, whose advertisement that was. So all that makes me want to do is not even go out and vote. Yeah,
well, the pundits basically say once you start using attack methods, then you're losing traction, and instead of talking about your own platform, you end up criticizing the other person's platform, which really never works.
Not a great strategy. So, I think you need to take the high road, focus on what you're bringing to people.
Desperation strategy, but it's nice that it's gone, and it's nice that it's over. But if we want, we can talk a little bit about the tax. You know, where you want to talk a little bit about tax.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from you on that, Jerry.
The accountant's world, now that the election is over, I mean, what has changed? And just like the election results, nothing really. I mean, we've been concerned prior to the election, and we have the same concerns. Things like, you know, the principal residence exemption, you know, that's just, they haven't touched it yet. I don't know if they ever will. I think my opinion is if they ever do, they'll give us some kind of an exemption, like, okay, once you make over $1 million on the sale of your principal residence, maybe you got to start paying some tax. We in the CPA community have thought that was coming for a long time. Hasn't happened yet. I think one thing that we all feel, we in the CPA world feel that's coming is an increase in capital gains rates from the current 50% to 3/4. It used to be 3/4 many years ago. So it's not that, you know, tragic to go back up there, but it's a big impact. So it's going to cost people a lot of money. So those are two areas where we were concerned before. The election happens, as we all know, we're in the same spot as we were before the election, other than $600 million more in debt, but who cares? They just keep printing money, right? It doesn't really become much of an issue, does it?
It seems that way, but you'd think it's going to catch up to us eventually.
Well, not us, our kids.
Well, our kids, but even, I mean, listen, even in the short term, we know that interest rates are likely to go up next year. And they can't keep paying people. Right now, they've been paying people, the CERB. I mean, that was my thought, was that they're going to start cutting that back. And that's a reason that Trudeau thought, here's a good time to call an election before he becomes very unpopular, because it's not going to be pretty because a lot of people are sitting around, they're not working. There's no incentive for them to work because they can get more money by staying at home.
Yeah, now that will end. And I think that was one of the reasons why he timed it as he did. But just from an economic point of view, I mean, we're like what, 1.2, $1.3 trillion in debt. It's just an astronomical number. And, you look at that and what does that mean? Even if the interest rates stay the same, how do you deal with such a debt? And a lot of it, they have to create economic growth, because when we talk about debt, we talk about the interest compared to GDP or the debt to GDP. So how do you continue to create economic activity? The easy way is keep the borders open. And, Trudeau certainly has made it clear that the border is wide open. 1.2 million people coming in 3 years. I think by 2050, they're going to have 10 million more Canadians. So the floodgates are open to create this economic activity that is needed to deal with this debt that we have. And whether that's good or bad is to be determined.
Yet to be determined. That's for sure. Jerry, talk to us about some year-end real estate tax strategies. It's we're almost at we're 3/4 in now or more.
Yeah. Now is
always. What are you telling your clients? How do they get ready?
As we get past the summer, as you mentioned earlier, the summer's over. We kind of get back into a school mode, a work mode, a bit of a routine. So it is a good time to start talking to clients about the tax planning strategies that we want to talk about before the end of the year. And there's all kinds of stuff we can talk about, specifically in real estate. We want to look at many different things. Capital gains. Okay, if capital gains are going up, I just met with a client today that's very concerned about the capital rate inclusion rate. Do you sell now? Do you sell next year? So those are things we strategize. If you sell, if you hold back a mortgage, you can defer your capital gain. Is deferring a capital gain a good idea now? Because if we defer it into the next year, it might be higher. Good time to look at, just overall structures, real estate structures, financial planning structures, investment structures, but specific to real estate. We talked to a lot of, I know this is the first year that a lot of real estate agents really start utilizing their personal real estate corps. So it's an interesting year with all the real estate agents as we utilize, we've gone past the should I have a corporate or should I have a PREC or not, and now we're into that. So now we have to strategize using those PRECs. And again, a great time of year to talk to these real estate agents about income splitting using their personal real estate corp. Not just real estate agents, anybody with a corporation. We do a lot of dividend planning. Dividend has a much tax favorable treatment. So this is a great time to plan all that. Again, a lot of these real estate agents, a lot of people in general have real estate rental properties. So we look at, what's going to happen towards the end of the year. How's the income looking? Can we take that net rental income, which is not taxed very favorably, and convert that into active corporate income at 12%. So all these things are things that we look at as we get closer to the end of the year. But we certainly, the goal is to minimize the tax. So there's lots of things that we can do. Characterization of income is a big thing. If you have a corporation, if we got to take money out of that corporation, do we take it out as a dividend, a management fee, a management bonus, a salary? So these are all kinds of things that we go through. Do we transfer real estate into a corporation? That was, there seems to be a lot of clients now that they have corporations, certainly in the real estate world. Should we be transferring our existing real estate into a corporation? Lots of stuff. So those are things that we.
So lots of things that you can do, it sounds, to help people be tax efficient, have the right structure. I wanted to ask you about the Smith maneuver.
Yeah, okay. So that's the Smith maneuver really in a simple terms is just ensuring that your mortgage interest is tax deductible or restructuring. So in simple terms, without getting too deep into it, if you have $100,000 of investments, and you also have $100,000 mortgage on your house, if that mortgage is not tax deductible, which most mortgages are not, it's a very easy strategy to A, sell your investments, get the $100,000, B, pay off your mortgage, C, reborrow the same amount of money on your mortgage, D, buy the investments back.
And now the interest cost is taxed,
so
as
now
long as it's not in a registered account.
Correct.
But
By just
but how
using,
does CRA really look at that? I mean, that is, like, that's clearly a manipulation
well, but we're
just to save on tax.
Yeah, but we are allowed to restructure our affairs to take advantage of what the Tax Act offers. So it's kind of a conflict because CRA has what they call GAR, General Anti-Avoidance Tax Rules. So they can look at a structure and go, hey, you're just doing this for tax purposes and we're going to deny it. And on the other hand, we as taxpayers have the right to restructure our affairs to take advantage of favorable tax treatment. So we're at a constant battle with CRA. And
I wonder how people have fared on that tax deductible mortgage, the Smith maneuver. It was a big book, right? We should let people know maybe a little bit of the history, but that was a book that came out a number of years ago. And I know there's a lot of mortgage brokers who teach that, and I learned about it. And then there's another part to it, right, where then you can every month you make a mortgage payment, and as you pay it down, there's these mortgages where you can you then use the available credit, immediately borrow money and buy more securities.
Yeah,
right?
and now actually there's strategies that we can use TFSAs. TFSAs now are kind of on our radar as accountants and investment planners. Because now we're up to $75,000 that you can put into a TFSA. So we use Smith maneuvers that we can take some of we split it in two. So we to try to make it simple. If you had that back to the $100,000 example, and then really to answer your question, as long as things are done right, and we have a nice clear audit trail for CRA, there's really nothing they can deny. So as long as it's done right, you got a clear audit trail, it's very clear where the money goes, very clear where the interest relates to, we're not going to have a problem. But now we're doing things like taking 60,000 of that 100 and putting it, you can use an RSP, you can put some of it into a TFSA, you can charge a higher interest rate on the TFSA, you can charge 20% on the TFSA, it grows on tax. So there's all kinds of strategies. I don't want to get deep into it, but certainly Smith maneuver and hybrids of it are very popular to make that. And there again, when you talk about year-end planning strategies, it's a great time to look at your mortgages.
Somebody has a question. Mirella has a question. Let me interrupt you for a moment. Can you please explain on how you defer capital gain taxation?
Well, one way would be to hold back mortgage. So you sell a property, you make $100,000 gain. If you're holding back a mortgage, you can defer that for up to five years. You need to take in 20% minimum every year, but it's depending on how much of that sale price you're holding back. So that's really one of the more common ways to defer the capital gain. And as I mentioned before, in today's environment, does it make sense to defer a capital gain? Because if we're deferring it and they change the capital gains rate, we might be paying 50% today, but next year we might be paying 75% of that. So yeah, that's really a more common way to defer a capital gain.
Okay, that's a good idea. And listen, you can always call Jerry. From time to time, we're going to put up everybody's contact information who's part of the broadcast tonight. If I didn't mention hello to everyone, I see we have Adele came in as well, Mirella. Ian, avoidance is different from evasion, for sure. Yeah, we don't want to be evading taxes. Good point. Ian Walterhouse, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so let me just tell you who we've got the whole plan for tonight's broadcast. So we're going to chat with Aaron Lutz now, Executive Director from Gilders Club. Then we're going to have a chat with, then Gary's going to ask me a quick question about divorce, because I had in mortgages. I had a very interesting case this week. Normally I always thought, and this is the standard idea, is that you need a separation agreement in hand. Came up against something very interesting this week, which I'll talk about. We're going to talk to Gavin McCrodin. Gavin McCrodin is from Huxton Black. He's a portfolio manager. He's also the chief compliance officer, and he's my mentor at Huxton Black, because that's where I'm licensed as a dealing representative. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is the difference between private and public assets. Why did Huxton Black, why would anybody, what is private and why would anybody consider it? We're going to talk about a little bit about the market, trends in the market, what's happening in the public markets. What is a portfolio manager to do that's different from an investment advisor? That's what we're going to talk with Gavin about. Then we're going to talk to an old friend of mine, Mark Kadeski. He's with us. Mark is a real estate agent and he's a manager. And he's been called upon. He was a dean over at one of the organizations teaching the real estate course. So people have been calling Mark, and he's started a new website and a service where real estate agents, if they have different types of questions, they can call Mark. And we're going to talk to Mark about disclosing defects, because the market's been so crazy hot. People are buying firm, no inspections. What happens when they get a surprise later? What was
I was not the dean.
You were not the dean?
I was not the dean. Well, an OREA instructor and a Humber facilitator, not the dean.
Were you like a manager over there or something? Okay, he's modest. Okay, he's been managing branches, and he's still doing consulting. Real estate agents call him by droves. Anyway,
geez, Mark, it sounded so good until you denied it.
It sounded good. All right. Anyway, listen.
It has to do with disclosure. So
okay,
disclosure. All right, very good. Everybody's got to worry about disclosure. It's important. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the difference between stigma and disclosing defects. Okay, that's with Mark Kadeski. So, but now Aaron Lutz. Aaron, welcome. Aaron is with Gilders Club. Some people might remember. To me, it's like clear as day. Gilda Radner. If anybody from used to watch Saturday Night Live, and it was back in the 70s or what. Rosanna Dana, and she passed away young from cancer. Lovely young lady. And then, I'll let Aaron, you tell us a little bit about the history and what does the organization do, and then we'll talk about what we got cooking for this weekend.
Well, cancer affects a lot of our lives. You talk about Canadian Cancer Society says that 1 in 2 Canadians in their lifetime will be diagnosed with cancer. But as we just had the Terry Fox run, and we've had a lot of other awareness, is that we've changed the landscape and the narrative of cancer. If you were told that you had cancer when Terry Fox was in '77, you'd be asking the question, how long do I have? But with advances, with new treatments, cancer centers, and research, it's now becoming more the standard of how do you live with cancer. Cancer is more commonly referred to in the medical community as a complex condition. And it's, how do you manage cancer treatments with your diabetes or with, a number of other ailments that we learn to be able to live with. So Gilders Club exists to be able to provide psychosocial and emotional support for anyone impacted by cancer. And, what does that mean? Well, you go to the hospital for treatment of the disease. Really good hospitals will treat you like a person, but what's there for you as a person and how you live with cancer? What's there for your spouse, your partner, and your children? You've just been told that you have cancer. How do you tell your child? How do you support your child? And this is what we do. We provide free care to anyone impacted by cancer. And while we're based in Barrie near the Royal Victoria Hospital, we actually have 6 members in Ottawa. We have members down in near Windsor. We have members, quite honestly, across from Ontario. And the virtual programming has really opened up a huge door for us in that regard. So we're there to be able to provide it. We are named after Gilda Radner, who was ironically the very first person who was hired for Saturday Night Live. You think of the greats that really emerged from there, your Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd. It's just that they were the titans of comedy, and anyone who is a comedy aficionado would have heard of Gilda Radner, and you can see the respect in the current batch of the titans of comedy have for what it is that Gilda was able to do. And certainly when she was told that she had cancer, as she quipped, I've been given membership to a club I never wanted to be part of. And the psychosocial and emotional support that she was able to engage through a group called the Wellness Community was, we need more of this. And after her passing, her spouse, Gene Wilder, and a few others started up Gilda's Club in New York City. Fast forward, over, I think 32 years later, we have 52 affiliates across North America, and Gilda's Club Simcoe Muskoka is one of 2 in Canada, the other being in Toronto. And again, we provide psychosocial and emotional support for anyone impacted by cancer. We have members as young as 4 years old to people that are into their 80s and 90s. And, it deals with, many of the questions that people would have when diagnosed, but also for the caregivers. So, cancer diagnosis isn't just for the person who was told that they have cancer, it's an entire network. And, myself, I'm lucky where I live that, I have lots of family around me, but here we are talking about, such dramatic changes in real estate markets, and people are moving from all over the place, and there's going to be people moving in that don't have those same support networks. What happens if you don't have someone to be able to call upon and be able to help you with what it is that you need? And sometimes it's just people's needs will vary. So we've seen people that'll come on over in between their cancer treatments, and they just want a place to be able to not be a mother, having to worry about their kids' needs, or, a wife worrying about her husband's, other details. It just, come in and be who you are, and be around people who get it. And, how many times have you heard the statement, if you know, you know? So we provide a safe place to do that. And, while our clubhouse has converted to a virtual program since the start of the pandemic, we do provide a great program support, and we're looking forward to our in-person programming which starts next month. We're just dipping our toe into the water because we deal with an immune compromised group. We have to be very careful in how we do this. But great anticipation, and the community that has been around us for the 10 years that we've built and supported our program has built a program where people do love us, and we don't receive government funding, so we live entirely off of donor dollars. Which is always going to be a challenge, but when you do good work and you wind up doing the things we do, it resonates with donors. So we're lucky to have a very good stable of donors, and we just look to be able to take advantage of how we can grow our program and help people in some of these farther reaching communities that have been seeking our help. We've added 20 new communities over the course of the pandemic from across Central Ontario that access our programs virtually. So, we're very happy to be able to serve our program. It's scientifically based. We do all the measurements, talk with the other affiliates in all the other cities, and we come up with programs that are professionally led by social workers, people that have their bachelor of social work, their master's of social work, and more. So we provide all of this free of charge for anyone who's going through a cancer treatment, because you got big questions and big worries, and paying about the things that you need is not one that you need to do. So that's what we've been able to accomplish at Gilda's Club, and just as much as fundraising is letting people know that we can do this. So it's sharing our message.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Talk to us about the event we have cooking up this weekend at the Heritage Winery and Cidery in Barrie.
Well, fundraising events always have challenges on what people want, and I think wine and cider is always going to work well. And the other one was sports teams, and you really can't go to the same sports venues as you used to. So this Sunday, starting at noon, we're going to have 7 musicians and 6 amazing sets over the span of 5 hours. And it's a donation-based event. Come on out and enjoy, having a social interaction. And it's a safe social interaction because it's going to be outdoors, and you bring your chair and you watch some great musicians. You might know a couple of them, David. And if you're able to make a donation, we're able to give you a tax receipt, and you're on a winery, so we can toast to the celebration of being able to help those who need a little support.
All right, so I'm just going to bring up the screen here so that people can see. That's a long website there, Gilda's Club simcoemuskoka.org. If you go to that one, you'll just take a snap a photo of it anyway, or send me an email or whatever, and we'll hook you up. So tickets
I'll
are
put it in the chat.
Tickets are, it's $20 to get in, but that's really just to cover some of the costs of the event, right? And I'm sponsoring the music, right? David Grossman, Rock Your Mortgage. I brought the musicians together, and I'll be on it about 12 o'clock to start. My friend Ray Gertner will be doing a duo, and then we have all these other amazing musicians that will be playing through the afternoon. God willing, we'll have nice sunny weather, and yeah, and the $20 also includes a drink pack. So from the winery, so alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverages will be available. So come on out, bring your family, bring your friends. It should be fun. We can just, schmooze, listen to some good music. Bring your own food. We're thinking about food truck or this or that, but at the end of the day, the thing is now at this time of year, we don't know 9 o'clock in the morning if the weather's really bad, and we'd have been on the hook for all kinds of catering. So we thought, you know what, let's provide music, let's provide some great beverages. People can pack a picnic, and there'll be a lot of room for social distancing. The grounds are really, really lovely in the winery. It's a great place, Heritage State Winery and Cidery. So come on out, bring your family, let's have some friends, let's enjoy some great music. I can assure you that there's going to be lots of great musicians there. So Aaron, thanks very much for joining us, and we appreciate it and look forward to seeing you on Sunday. You're welcome to hang around if you're available still and you want to hear and learn about all the wonderful things we're going to be talking about for the rest of the show. But if you have other obligations, we won't be insulted if you have to go or anything like that. Okay.
I appreciate it very much, and thank everyone for listening to me. I will stay for a little bit until my 7-year-old son needs to go to bed. So, the hair disappeared with kids, and he's child number 3. So there's no escaping those responsibilities as that happens.
Well, listen, nothing more important and fun than putting your kid to sleep. So that's important.
I fall asleep before him. So it's the peril of working in this world, which I think I'm going to be preaching to the choir here.
All right.
Thanks. That was a great presentation.
Thanks a lot, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
So, Jerry, you have a question for me?
Yeah, I do. Well, we want to talk. I understand you're on a very interesting situation case involving mortgages, divorce, separation.
Yeah.
So why don't you fill us in on that?
Sure. So basically, the thing is that the kind of a standard position, this is always, I've been doing mortgages now for about 18 years, and the standard position, the standard answer is that when you get divorced or separated, if you want to buy another property, you need a separation agreement. The matrimonial home needs to be dealt with. If there's going to be support paid or received, especially if it's going to be paid, the lenders want to know, what are your financial obligations? So that's always been the standard go-to. This week, I got or in the last week or two, I got a very strong buyer came to me, good income, did not need to borrow a ton of money. They had more than 50% down on a property. They came to me, David, we bought firm. We're closing in 2.5 weeks. We need a mortgage. We just got separated. We sold the matrimonial home last month. Do you have a separation? No, not yet. Okay, so I'm not going to get into now. They had there was a partial separation agreement to deal with the division of the assets, but the support had not been determined as of yet. So I went out. I belong to this network online where I can go to other mortgage brokers, and a lot of mortgage brokers share information there and say, hey, here's this case. Does anyone have an idea? Everybody said no separation agreement. No, forget it. No, not going to happen. So there's one guy there, his name I'm not going to mention. There's one guy, and he specializes in doing mortgages for people who are recently separated, divorced. He says, I think there's a solution here. So he told me how to position it. You know, a lot of times in life, as in mortgage applications, it's how you present things. And we present things as they are, but you sometimes you highlight certain things and you're emphatic about other things, and the underwriters get the message.
Yeah.
And so we managed to get an approval from a primary lender. We thought we were going to have to go to one of these alternative lenders, where you pay around 3% plus fees, as opposed to 2% or lower. So it ends up, and we were able to get these people a mortgage, and I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty about how it was, but believe everything was 100%. We don't do any funny business. We still get people coming to us. This thing seems to be the thing of a mortgage broker. Do you do documents?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Do we do documents? You mean we create,
Great job.
letters, job letters? No, never. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. But this is so. So you learn something new every day. So I just thought that was interesting, and I wanted to share that.
Okay, well, it's interesting because I had a situation too you don't even know this question's coming, but now that you've mentioned your situation, I had one too, where a client came to me and they're splitting up, and he works, the spouse, stay-at-home mother of 3 kids. They have a house. But he's going to move out and she's going to maintain the house, but she can't qualify for the mortgage. So basically they're separating. She gets the house, he's going away. How does she qualify for this mortgage now? Or does she?
Well, so she's not working.
But now he's willing to co-sign, but they want him off title. Does that work? Can he still stay on the mortgage?
He can guarantee
and
well,
get off title?
Oh, no. Well, yeah, he can be on as a guarantor.
On the mortgage and then come off title.
Yes.
Okay, so that's probably the solution for them.
Yeah, if they
He's
want him
willing to
off title,
guarantee it.
and he's willing to
but
guarantee
they want
it.
him off title.
Yeah, so if he's willing to guarantee it, then that's the way to do
Okay,
it.
so that's a good solution.
Yeah.
To the problem.
Yeah. Now, some lenders will say that they want him on title, even if it's for 1%, right?
So tenants in common.
Yeah. Well, I don't know the legal terminology,
Yeah.
but from a lender's point of view, they don't really care, because whatever percent you're on for, you're considered 100% responsible for the debt.
Right, but
Right.
from a separation split up point of view, for lack of better words, they don't want the husband on title.
Understood. Yeah. So no, it can be done with the husband off title. Yeah.
And can it be done without him guaranteeing that mortgage? She has a little part-time job and gets a pretty big hefty child tax benefit check. Do the lenders consider the child tax benefit check?
They do, but usually up until the kid's 16 years of age.
Right,
And
okay.
so
We may have to drag your expertise into this one.
Sure. There's, different ways to handle things, but it sounds like him guaranteeing the loan, if he's willing to, would be a help. But certainly we'll look at all her, forms of income, and if there's see what can be done.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Good.
if she's
Okay.
got liquid assets, sometimes we can.
Yeah, no, the house is the main asset.
Right. So if there's no liquid assets, then it's largely an income thing, unless she's over 55, and then you can consider a reverse mortgage or something
35
like
or
that.
something. No.
Yeah.
Okay, good,
So-
thank you.
All right, very good. So that's the story on mortgages and divorce for tonight. Now,
Actually, I've got
Yeah.
another story if you want. I mean, about
Okay.
a separation agreement with
Sure.
the client. So just to make a long story short, so I had this couple, they were clients for a long time, the nicest couple you could ever meet, and then they come to me and they split up, and which was just unbelievable. And it was the most amicable split up I've ever seen 2 people have. She didn't work, he worked, he was leaving the house, he was gonna pay for the mortgage, everything, he was gonna financially fund everything. So they asked me if I could get involved in helping them structure some kind of a separation agreement. So we did, we structured something like he keeps paying the mortgage, the house continues to grow in equity, and they end up splitting the equity at the end of the day, even though they're separated. So it was a nice arrangement, they both agreed to it, everything is good.
Mhm.
At the end of the year, I file their tax return, and there's support payments that are tax deductible on one side, on his side, and income on her side. But they didn't have a separation agreement. So I said, well, you're going to need a separation agreement to support this. So they created something on their own. We just put some documents together. And I said to them, I said, well, we can claim this deduction, but if CRA does an audit, they'll want a more formal separation agreement.
Mhm.
Again, long story short, we make the claim, CRA comes back and audits and wants a formal separation agreement. So I said, you need to take this to a lawyer and get it notarized. So the wife went to 3 lawyers. None of them would notarize it and endorse it because she could get more from him.
Mhm.
Okay, so this was one of these examples where the lawyers have really screwed up a really good separation. And by the time the wife had gone to the 3rd lawyer, her mindset completely changed. So all these lawyers are saying,
no.
don't sign that. Don't you dare sign that. You can get so much more from this guy. And she's like, I don't want to get anything more. He's paying my mortgage. By the time she got to the 3rd lawyer, her mindset changed, and then the knives came out and it became a battleground. So it was a very sad story to see 2 people very amicably splitting up, had figured out everything on their own. And by the time they go through the legal system, and this is not the first time I've seen this from an accountant's point of view, by the time the wife was finished with the 3rd lawyer, the knives were up between the 2 of them and it was a mess. So I just thought I'd share that one
Well,
too.
that's an interesting
So
story.
I guess the moral of the story is if we're going to make claims for support payments, it has to be supported by not only a separation agreement, but you need ILA, independent legal advice, to provide the support and endorsement of that separation agreement for CRA.
Mhm. Right. Well, you'd think somebody would still give her, the independent legal advice, but,
They would not.
you say, you could do much better, but
No.
here's, I gave you the advice, so you
Yeah,
just.
but these would, I'm not endorsing you to sign this because you can get so much
I
more. It's sad. It was a sad story, but anyway, I just
Well,
thought I'd share that. So.
That's unfortunate. That's very
Anyway, let's get off the
unfortunate. Okay,
separation.
so let's
topics.
move on to something more positive.
Yeah,
Okay, so we're going to talk about building your wealth, and we're going to talk with Gavin McRoden from Huxton Black.
Nice.
Gavin, how are you? Good to see you.
Hey, good evening, guys. It's good to be here. Jerry, great to see you. David, always a pleasure.
Great to see you.
Something going on with
Yeah,
the audio
it's
here. Hang on here.
It's,
Hold on.
it was very loud on our end. Is it just and distorted? Was it for others too, or just talking maybe just a little soft?
Test.
Yeah, it's distorted.
It's just like on hot,
Okay.
super high your mic is on super hot.
But you're looking good, Gavin. I'll give you that much.
You look great.
Guys?
Yeah, it's a little blur. It's
Now you sound like Charlie Brown's teacher.
yeah. Say something else, please, Gavin.
Test.
Okay, maybe just come back a little bit from the mic and talk a little softer. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
No sweat. I can say the alphabet: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P,
All right.
Q, R, S, T, U, V.
People can always turn down their speakers if it's an issue. Okay, so Gavin, if you would talk to us, first of all, can you talk to us about the markets themselves? Like interest rates we believe interest rates are going to come down. What does this mean to people who are holding, different stocks and bonds and things like that? How might it impact their portfolios, and how are you guiding people at this time?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So fixed income is a critical part of what we do at Huxton Black when managing diverse portfolios. And the fixed income market has been a real tricky place to navigate going back, I'd say even to 2008, when rates were at then all-time lows, and we've seen them just continue to free fall almost, with a few blimps here and there, or spikes. But I remember while at RBC, a couple of the different advisors I worked with having real frank discussions and heart-to-heart discussions with management about, our obligation to continue to include fixed income in client portfolios. And his argument, which a lot of us agreed with at the time, was, you're basically guaranteeing a negative rate of return for clients post-tax, post-inflation, with rates at all-time lows. Now, for better or worse, rates have come down. Continuing to hold bonds, even over the last 12, 13 years, has done well from a capital gains perspective. We've got a real vanilla, high-quality bond constituent in our portfolio. It's an iShares product. It's the U.S. investment grade portfolio. Average duration's about 10 years. And we're seeing tremendous capital gains in that, because as interest rates fall, the demand for the older bonds it increases, and it puts this, I don't want to call it artificial, because it is a real capital gain in the client's portfolios. But if you don't take advantage of it and maybe crystallize it and deploy the proceeds into something else, the likelihood is over the next 2 to 3 years in interest rates, if and when they do go up, I might debate you a little bit on whether or not rates are going up in 2022 or 2023. I'd probably be in the 2023 camp myself. I heard you mention earlier maybe 2022 is what you're thinking. But when interest rates do tick up, that's when you're going to find a real popular portfolio asset mix for decades has been a 60% stock, 40% bond portfolio. And I think the average investor who's invested that way will unfortunately end up in some hot water when interest rates go up and you're getting a meaningfully negative return on your bonds. This year to date, I'd say that a lot of the bonds have a slightly negative experience, call it like a negative half a point, depending on the duration of your bond portfolio. So what we are doing at Uxton Black is finding more and more alternative fixed income investments, oftentimes in the private space, not necessarily publicly traded, that we can allocate to. So we're shrinking the vanilla government and corporate, publicly traded bonds and shifting into things, whether they're mortgage portfolios for clients, debentures of private companies that are paying, mid to high single digits with a good track record. We like the management. We do a lot of due diligence on any alternative that we recommend clients, and I always invest in them personally before ever recommending them to clients as well. But that's one of the ways that we're trying to shift our portfolios where it makes sense. Now, that being said, it's not necessarily suitable for every investor, right? People have some liquidity constraints. It may not be the right strategy for, because some of these things that ran like a 5-year GIC that was a 7 or 8% interest coupon payment, we call it. But if somebody's unable to really commit to a 5+ year strategy with us, then you can appreciate that it might not make the most sense. So not all of our clients fall into that camp. We still manage publicly traded bonds in the portfolios, but more and more we're allocating to alternatives where we can and where it makes sense, certainly for accredited clients.
So Huxton Black became an exempt market dealer so that you could offer private investments. You want to just explain why did the company take that direction? Maybe not everybody even knows what are private investments.
Sure. So private investments just to get into the registration. But so we're licensed as discretionary portfolio managers, and the sort of the bolt-on registration that we included back in 2018 when we got registered was that of an exempt market dealer, to your point, David. So not only are we able to manage very, traditional publicly traded portfolios for clients, but at the time, having left, I did, close to 50, well, let's say 10 or 11 years rather on Bay Street and at big bank-owned brokerages. And when I finally left to start Huxley Dock with a couple of other industry, reformed bankers, I like to kid, I was most excited about the alternative space and helping private companies raise money to execute on their vision. I just be clear here. When I say invest in private companies, we have rarely, if ever, been the very first round of investor capital for clients. We're not a VC fund. We're not angel investors, and our clients. But the publicly traded businesses that you read about in the TSX and on the S&P 500 and global indices, what have you, they really represent such a small percentage of corporations. And there's a ton of very well managed businesses, whether it's here in Canada or south of us in the US, and in every sector you can imagine. It could be real estate, it could be pharma, it could be billboard manufacturers and scoreboard manufacturers, you name it. So the difference between the portfolio management registration, which we use for the core of our business in managing traditional portfolios, and the exempt market dealer space that we have gotten into is accessing these private investments for clients. Now, without trying to muddy the waters too much, so as a portfolio manager, we can include private investments in our clients' portfolios, but sometimes we're just doing transactions, whether it's a corporate finance transaction for a company, or some of our clients might have relationships elsewhere, maybe the advisor to play outside of their box, so to speak. We might do something that's really just transactional. So we're not adhering to the fundamental standards of diversification, but we're just adding a single bolt-on position of a private investment, private equity, or private debt investment for our clients. And that's where the exempt market dealer registration comes from.
So now, do you want to tell us a little bit about exchange traded funds? Because I think that's something that Huxenbach is pretty big on, where the public markets are concerned. What's an exchange traded fund, and why do you believe in them?
Yeah, so exchange traded funds have come a long way. They were actually first introduced in Canada, the Canadian product. They've been for decades, but probably more so in the last 10 or 15 years. You've seen a tremendous amount of uptick, both institutionally, and I like to call it the smart money. I think of the pension managers, whether that's teachers' pension plan or CPP or owners, or even the endowments like Harvard and Yale. I track what these money managers are doing just from an asset class, curiosity and best practices. And more of these smart money managers have been allocating to exchange traded funds. Exchange traded fund is almost like a new version of a mutual fund. Mutual funds have been around since the 60s or whenever it was, and they were at the time a very easy investment, an easy mechanism to get diversification across a number of sectors and a number of stocks when you only wanted to invest $500 at a time. You can't easily go to the market and build yourself a diversified portfolio when you've only got $500. But with a mutual fund, you can own just a fraction of a share inside a pool alongside of other investors. The problem with mutual funds, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but they've got a bad rep in Canada for being very expensive. An average mutual fund in Canada is probably coming in the neighborhood of about 2.3% MER. That's the management expense ratio that clients end up paying. And part of that goes to the investment management company, like the issuer of the mutual fund. And part of that 2.3 would go to the advisor who recommended a portfolio. So with technology and rules-based indices, a lot of issuers have come to the market with exchange traded funds. So you don't have the same benefits of being able to diversify very quickly with a small, minimum investment amount, and the cost is a fraction of what the predecessor mutual fund industry was charging. So for example, you could go to your bank and buy a U.S. equity fund, which would probably closely resemble the S&P 500, give or take, or you can buy an ETF that seeks to replicate the performance of the S&P 500 for, 5 basis points or 0.05% with as far as a management fee goes. So at Huxton Black, we've decided to build our core portfolios using ETFs, exchange traded funds, because it keeps the costs down significantly for clients and allows us to be very tactical. We can get in and out of positions quickly if and when we have to, and we can serve a great number of clients using ETFs. Like they're just a great addition to our toolbox, so to speak. I've managed portfolios of individual stocks and bonds and GICs and options, but nothing is as efficient as ETF. So we've got sleeves for Canadian, asset allocation, US, emerging markets, global, real estate sleeves, all with unique ETFs. There's thousands of them out there now, and we've got the freedom and flexibility because we're not tied to any particular single bank or investment firm. We can go out and choose, what we believe is the best real estate ETF, the best emerging markets ETF for our clients' targets and risk objectives, et cetera. And then we package that up into a portfolio, and it ends up being very cost effective for clients.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. Jerry, you had a question?
Yeah, I got a question. Thanks, Gavin. That's always interesting listening to your perspective on anything. Just curious, what in your opinion, at what asset level does somebody consider using a portfolio manager like yourself?
Yeah, so that's
asset level.
So when we set out to put together our business plan for Huxton Black, both my partners and I come from the bank-owned firms, right? Capital markets and wealth management. And for better or worse, while I was at RBC, our minimums were $1 million. If you didn't have $1 million of investable assets with us, I'd say thank you very much. It was great to meet you. I'm going to introduce you to somebody at the bank branch, and you'll be, well looked after, and probably recommended a portfolio of mutual funds. It's not uncommon for the big bank advisors and the biggest teams at the biggest banks to target that same demographic, the $1 million plus. So for us, our sweet spot is what I refer to as mass affluent. So you've got a few $100,000. You're not necessarily getting the attention of the best portfolio managers at the banks, because they've all, either the bank has imposed minimums of $500,000 or $1 million, or the team themselves, they've got some discretion on who they choose to work with. So back, we've decided that, now, because new investors have so much to benefit from not getting trapped into these old, vehicles of mutual funds, we've said, wherever you're starting, we're here to help. So we've got, clients who've just started tax-free savings accounts with us, or RESPs, and they've just put in their first $500 or $2,000. Now, that's a bit of a lost leader for us, and we hope that they have a great experience and share their story with friends and family, and we earn some other opportunities to do business. But I'd say that our sweet spot, Jerry, to answer the question is, families with a few $100,000, they've got a mutual fund portfolio. They're not getting a lot of attention and advice. They're spending a lot in fees, and we believe that we can do a better job for less.
Interesting. Okay, thanks, Gavin.
Okay, Gavin, thank you very much. Appreciate sharing your insights there. We'll have to test your sound again later before next time, because I'm not sure if it's something to do with the integration with the Zoom or whatever it is, but we'll test it out for next time. Thank you very much, though. Appreciate your input.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Mark Kadeski, welcome, my old friend. Mark Kadeski, we were friends from the age of 6, used to play hockey on his driveway, went to school together. Married, divorced, became friends again, played music. Mark's also in a band. He's a singer. And real estate agent, lots of experience, and also an educator and coach manager. So Mark, we were going to talk to you about disclosing defects. So what's the issue there with respect to disclosing defects? You sell a property, is it buyer beware, or could you be in trouble?
It's a good question. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, David. Those of you whose cameras are not on, I certainly don't want to put you under any duress, but if you're comfortable doing it, it'd be great if you could turn it on, because I'd love to have some interaction here and make it much more interesting for everybody. I'm not just going to sit here and thanks, Ian, appreciate that. Do we have any age? I think Randy Joe's an agent, right? David?
I don't know, Randy.
I think so. I think Randy is. I'm not sure if anybody else is, but Ian, you are too. Okay, great. Thanks, Ian. All right. So you probably have seen on the news lately. I've noticed it a couple times, like on Sean O'Shea and on CTV News, where they have the thing that comes up at 6:30, like a consumer alert. And you're being told that people made offers on properties and they got caught up in multiples. And so they didn't have any conditions on inspection or any other conditions at all. And then when they ended up closing on the house, they found out that there were some problems. So the question I have is, does the buyer have any recourse in a situation where there was a latent defect, something that they just didn't see?
And by the way, Randy says, yes, she's an agent.
Yeah, I see that. So does the buyer, yes or no, does the buyer have any recourse if they end up closing on a property, they did not have an inspection, and it turned out when they closed on the property in February, and come April, when the spring runoff started, all the snow started to melt, they had Niagara Falls in their basement, which was finished. So Randy, you say they do have recourse. Does anybody say no, they don't?
I'll say no. I mean,
Can you hear me, Mark?
Yeah, I can hear you, Ian.
Okay, fantastic. Now, my understanding, what I would do, always go to the lawyer first, but my understanding is if it's a latent defect and they did not disclose it, that they would be liable.
By they, you mean?
Sellers.
The seller. Yeah, and that's actually true. So it always surprised me when I saw those things on the news that that they didn't try to have, to have their day in court, because you're quite right. The law is pretty clear on this. If it's a material latent defect, which is to say it's a physical issue that could affect the habitability of the property or could affect the safety of it, the seller has a legal obligation to disclose it. So now here's a question for you. You're about to list the property. And this is for anybody here. You don't have to be an agent to answer this, but put yourselves in the position of being an agent who's about to list a property, and the seller tells you, between you, me, and the lamppost, every spring, I got a problem here with water, but I just painted it over. No one's going to be any the wiser, and I want you to stay stum. Now, that you've got an obligation, a fiduciary obligation, to put the best interests of your seller above all, and to follow your seller's lawful instructions. You've got obedience as one of your fiduciary obligations. So the question is, what do you do?
Mark, can I jump in here?
Yeah.
I always thought that there was a form. I could be wrong. I'm not a real estate agent, but I thought there's a form that the seller has to fill out to disclose anything, but I also understand that the seller can refuse to provide that.
So
can you shed light on that?
Yeah, you're talking about a seller property information statement, and you're quite right. You could ask the seller to sign it or to fill it out and sign it, and the seller can certainly refuse, under no obligation to sign it. So let's say, for argument's sake, and that's a whole other conversation, the SPIS seller property information statement, a whole other conversation to have, but you're quite right. So let's assume for the moment they did not sign one, as there's no obligation. So what do? Randy Joe, you said refer them. What's another possibility?
So if I can jump in again, could
Yeah.
I ask my agent, who's, let's say, the buyer, I'm the buyer, I asked for the seller to fill out the form, they refuse for whatever reason.
Yeah, but
Can
you're not there. We're not there yet. We're only at the stage where the listing agent is at the seller's house talking about getting the paperwork signed to put the property on the market. It's not even on the market yet. And the seller says, I don't want you to disclose that there's a.
Okay, sorry, I just want to maybe share this because we did a bunch of fix and flips in one of the houses. They didn't sign, there wasn't this information form, and I asked the question, I go, hey, where's, how come they're not filling out this information form? And I was kind of brushed off. It was just, wow, they don't want to, we didn't care that much because we were knocking it down and rebuilding it anyway. But I just found that a little peculiar, that if I was in the same position, looking at that same house, not to knock it down and rebuild it, but to move into it, I would find that a little peculiar. And I thought I could go to my agent and say, hey, go find out what's going on. But anyway, sorry.
Okay, well, just to briefly answer that, once again, the seller's under absolutely no obligation to do it. And in certain parts of the province, they're commonplace for sellers to fill them out and to make them available to buyers. But in GTA, in 27 years, I've never once asked a seller to fill it out, nor will I ever.
Wow, okay, interesting.
Yeah, for lots of different reasons, which again, I don't want to get into now because this is I want to focus on the disclosure aspect.
So Mark, I was just going to mention on that, if I'm sitting down and it's in the listing presentation and it has happened, I do make them aware of their responsibility to explain the latent defect. I will not work with someone like that, but the other part of it too is when I explain it, I explain why you would want to get it fixed. Because not only if they're going to be moving, whoever moves in, they're going to talk to the neighbors, and the neighbors probably know that they've had problems or issues with the basement. So it's better to be taken care of right there.
Okay,
or I'm not going to work with them.
Okay, so excellent. So a few things to consider here. First of all, I mentioned that your fiduciary obligation is to put your best interests above your seller's best interest or your client's best interest above all else. But I left off three very important words at the end of that sentence, which are accept the law. So you got to put your client's best interest above all else, accept the law. And that's very important because, Ian, as you just said, yeah, the seller has a legal obligation to disclose it. And so do you by extension. And that's not even necessarily Real Estate Biz Brokers Act, that's common law. Okay, so we've got an obligation to disclose, but the seller also has an obligation to disclose. And so it's incumbent upon us to tell the seller, well, listen, buddy, if you don't want to disclose it, you're taking a big chance. And I can tell you, I'm not going to break the law for you or anybody else because I kind of like having my registration. Okay, so that's one thing that as lay people, it's important for you to know also that you have an obligation to disclose any latent defect. I'm not talking about something that's readily observable because it's readily observable. I'm talking about something that a prudent buyer with regular eyes wouldn't be able to see, and maybe even an inspector wouldn't be able to pull it up. Okay, possibly. So that's with respect to latent defects. Now, we get into another issue with respect to disclosures. And let me ask you all, would you, and I'm going to take you along a continuum. And if this makes some of you uncomfortable, I do apologize, but it's important to talk about it because we as realtors run up against this, and buyers are going to run up against it possibly on a frequent basis as well. But how many of you would be reluctant or would refuse to buy a property in a situation like this? You've got an old couple in their hundreds. They've, the lady's got blue hair. He's got, like me, has no hair. They go into the bedroom one night. They walk into the bedroom hand in hand. They go to sleep, and they both pass away in their sleep, peacefully with smiles on their faces. Would it affect any of you such that you would not buy the property? Okay, some it would, some it wouldn't. And then we go further along the continuum where somebody may be within, okay, Randy, thank you for that. Maybe somewhere along the continuum, somebody had an illness and passed away in the house. Would that affect you? And some would say, well, it depends what it is. And then you get a little bit more, maybe somebody committed suicide. Maybe there was a murder, things like that. So you get further along the continuum. Now, I can tell you that I was an OREA instructor for many years before they lost the mandate, and now it's Humber, where this doesn't come up anymore because it's not in the curriculum in terms of what we talk about in class. But at OREA, I talked about this a lot. Let me ask you this one. How many of you have either grown up in or know somebody who has grown up in a haunted house? What I started to say is, when I was with OREA, I asked that question every time I talked about this, every class, and every single time, I'm talking hundreds of times, with the exception of once, at least one person put up their hand and said, I did. Every single time. And sometimes it was Casper the Friendly Ghost, and sometimes it was an angry one. Okay, so I have a question for you now. If you are a realtor, do you or do you don't have to disclose either that the house is haunted or that somebody passed away in the house? Randy Joe says yes, disclose. Ian?
So I do not know what we would have to disclose, whether I would disclose that information or not. If the seller thought it was haunted, I don't think I would disclose that. If somebody did die in there, I guess it would depend on the nature of how they passed. It would definitely be a stigmatized property if other people knew about it. So the short answer is I don't know.
Okay, and that's really what we're talking about here is stigma. So thank you for bringing up that word. And when we're talking about a stigma, essentially what we're talking about is something that causes an emotional or a psychological reaction. It's very different from a latent defect that we talked about earlier, which is strictly a physical defect of some sort that's going to affect the safety or the structural integrity of the property or whether or not it's habitable. Okay, because you could certainly argue that for many, many people, these stigmas that we're talking about, they couldn't care less. It certainly doesn't affect whether or not the house is habitable for them. Whereas others, it absolutely does. Even in the first instance I gave you, where people passed away very, after long, happy lives with smiles on their faces, hand in hand, they wouldn't go near that. So I'm going to tell you, and we can spend the rest of the night on this topic, but I'll tell you what RICO has to say about it, what the registrar has to say about it. Okay. Now, the RICO is the Real Estate Council of Ontario, for those of you who are not registrants, and they're our governing body. They enforce the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act, and that's the statute by which we have to run our daily business lives and real estate lives. Okay. So the registrar says, believe it or not, there is no law anywhere on the books in Ontario that says we must disclose the existence of a stigma. Nothing. It's not in the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act. There's no statute, and there's no common law that says we have to do it. There's a but. First of all, if you are working on behalf of your buyer, so it's not your listing, it's your buyer, you've got an obligation to just tell them everything you know, period, end of story. So whether or not it bothers you makes no difference. And you don't necessarily know if it bothers your buyers. The only way you're going to know is to tell them about it. And that's your obligation. Because if your buyer is a client rather than a customer, with that fiduciary obligation you have to them, you got to crawl under every rock to find out every bit of information you can, every bit of material information, and let them know about it. If it's your listing, so your seller is selling a house where somebody either passed away or there was a murder committed there or something like that, it's a bit trickier. Because as I said, there's no law necessarily that says that you must disclose. However, that does not preclude a buyer from suing a seller and the agents on both sides because you didn't tell me, and had I known, I wouldn't have bought the property. Yeah, but I also didn't tell you I made fried fish last week and it still smells down in the basement. But that doesn't mean, so you don't know how far you have to go and what information you have to give. So in a nutshell, here's your best bet. If it's your listing and you don't know whether or not you should disclose and your seller tells you not to disclose, your best bet is to tell your seller, have a conversation with your lawyer and let the lawyer tell you whether or not they think you should be disclosing to potential buyers. And whatever your lawyer says, that's what we'll do, because my obligation is to carry out your lawful instructions. And if you tell me not to disclose, that is lawful. I can not disclose lawfully. I'm not breaking any law if I don't disclose, because there is no law that says I must. So I'll do what you tell me to do, but I want something in writing from your lawyer to cover your ass and to cover mine. And that's how I would handle it. Now, if you're asked, yeah, get the direction in writing, exactly. Now, if you are asked if it's your listing, you're asked by a buyer, you cannot lie, because remember, you also have an obligation to treat everybody, this is registrants and non-registrants, fairly and honestly and with integrity. So you certainly can't say no if you're asked the question, did somebody pass away in the house? But you can not answer and tell them, you know what, if that's important to you, go do your own investigation.
But then you could not represent them, right? They'd have to have their own buyer's agent.
Okay, now this is where it gets tricky, because if it's your listing and the seller has told you not to disclose and your buyer, who is also your client, you're double ending it, you're in multiple representation, now you've got a bit of a problem. What do you do? Because your seller's telling you no, but you've got an obligation to your buyer to tell them everything you know about it.
Go find your own real estate agent.
But this is your own buyer and you are their own agent.
I'm saying when the buyer comes to you,
Well,
you could say, get your agent. I'm working exclusively with the seller.
David, what if you're already working with the buyer and then you list the property after the fact? Right? So they didn't come from an open house. You already have a relationship with your buyer. And certainly that happens. And then you get a listing. You say, you know what, I got a perfect property for you. I just listed it. Okay, so it becomes very, very tricky. So that's the point here. So I just wanted to make a differentiation between a latent defect, which is a physical defect, and stigma, which is not a physical defect. There is law governing material latent defects, the physical aspect of it, that you got to disclose no matter what. Stigma, you don't, but maybe you should. It just depends on the circumstances and what the seller's comfortable with.
Gavin makes an interesting comment, but I think the Sherman home, I think, was torn down, if I'm not mistaken. Gavin noted the Sherman home doesn't seem to be able to find a buyer, or has it?
Yeah, it didn't. Randy Joe, do you know for sure that it was? Yeah, it was torn down. I think you're right.
Yes.
I
heard it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and the same thing with the Bernarda house, by the way, guys. Same thing. So stigma certainly can be attached to it. Those two cases, however, as you know, were very, very, very high profile, and kind of everybody knew about them. But not all situations are like that, certainly. So you don't necessarily know in all cases that something's gone on there.
So Ian, and this is not Ian Walter House. Oh, he's kidding. I was gonna say, I didn't know whether he was kidding or not. Don't
Yeah.
the spirits stay with the land? It's a good point. It's a good point.
Isn't it something that maybe somebody, they shouldn't even know? What you don't know doesn't harm you? I don't know.
Well, until you find out from the neighbors.
Yeah, but there are
Yeah.
certain cultures for whom this is much more important than others. Some people just absolutely couldn't care less. Great, I'm getting a deal. Some just could not care less, no matter what happened there. And others don't want to go near it if the slightest little thing happened. And you know what? That's why Baskin Robbins has 31 flavors.
Sounds like that
Notwithstanding
flavor.
rum raisin should never have been invented. Let's put that aside. But
What's that, Jer?
Remember that place we were looking at outside of Wasaga Beach? It was an old church. And we were kicking tires on it, but then we found out that it was a graveyard.
Oh, graveyard.
yeah, well, that's another one. A lot of people don't want to live anywhere near a cemetery. So there are all kinds of things, and there's no accounting for taste. And this is why I'm saying what, as registrants, we can't look at whether or not it bothers us. We just have to tell our buyers absolutely everything about it, even if they don't necessarily notice it, and tell them how it could affect them. Okay.
All right.
That's it.
Very good, Mark. Very interesting. Thanks for sharing, and thanks everybody for joining and participating. I'm just going to post one more time the contact information if anybody wants to snap a photo or speak to anybody who presented here today. Everybody's phone numbers and emails, addresses are up there. Mark recently launched marksmentionables.com, and as a realtor, he makes it available for you. If you need to ask questions, you can give him a call. So follow up with Mark, follow up with Gavin to talk about your portfolio. He won't steer you wrong. And this Sunday, we'll see you at, I hope, Gilda's Club, the event, the music event. Let's hope for nice weather. Don't forget to get your tickets. And Jerry, he's here for you. If you want to do your year-end planning or anything else to do with taxes, give him a call. And if you need a mortgage, give me a ring. And it was very nice to have you all here as part of today's kicking off the fall. And everybody have a nice rest of the evening, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Have a nice night.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.